In today's video, you're going to learn how to get up and running with the Arnold Renderer for Cinema 4D. Let's go. Welcome back, everybody. It's Nick here again from Greyscalegorilla, giving you the tools, training, and tutorials to help make you a better motion designer. Now, today we're going to sit down with Chad Ashley and learn some of the fundamentals of the Arnold Renderer for Cinema 4D. But before we do, I wanted to make sure that you're signed up and subscribed to our YouTube channel, where we have a ton more tutorials like this coming out really soon. And also, if you're interested, Chad Ashley actually built an intro to Arnold scene file that we're sharing on our website. I'm going to link that up in the description and also right here, so you can download it right now and kind of follow along with us. All right, so in today's video, we get to sit down with Chad Ashley, and he gives us an overview of texturing, lighting, and even render settings inside of Arnold for Cinema 4D. And what was really great was Chris and I were there in order to ask some questions, and really ask him questions as a kind of a standard renderer and physical renderer user, jumping into Arnold and just kind of asking questions on how to set all that stuff up. So what you're gonna see is the result of that video phone call we had just a few days ago, where we learned all about Arnold. So let's jump right into it, and let's sit down with Chad Ashley and let's learn some Arnold Renderer.
Well, all right, let's go. So yeah, I'm just pretending right now that I've never opened this before. So this is just a standard layout. And once you install Arnold, even if you have like the free demo on their site, you can install it, run it. It's just going to have a watermark, which is kind of unobtrusive, really, compared to other watermarks. So it's kind of fun to play around with before you even buy it or decide if you want to buy it at all. So the way you find it is under plugins, and it's going to be under C4D to A, which stands for Cinema 4D to Arnold. And usually what I'll do is I'll kind of tear off this little menu item here, and I actually have a whole layout that I created just for Arnold, but I'm not going to dive into that because I'm going to pretend like I've never used it before. I think that'll be helpful for you guys. So you're met with all of these buttons, and they're pretty self-explanatory. In fact, if you click on the light, it gives you the option to create all these different kinds of lights. You can create a skylight, which is sort of like the one that you get in physical. And then we have this procedural, which I'm not going to get in today, which is basically the saving and loading of assets, like instance assets. We have volumes, which you can load in open VDB volumes from Houdini or Fume or wherever you want to generate fog, smoke, fire, all that sort of thing. The Arnold driver will come in a little bit later. Arnold AOV is going to come in later. The TP group will come in later. And the most important button, besides probably the light, is going to be this IPR window. So if I click on this IPR window, it's going to launch into this IPR session, and the IPR just stands for Interactive Photorealistic Renderer. So what you're seeing right here in the IPR is it's black. Why is it black? Even if I load in a sphere, it's still black. The reason is because I don't have any lights in my scene at all right now. So if you just want to open up Arnold and like have it make something and draw something in the IPR, you're going to have to create a light for it to start off with. And right now I'll just start off with a quad light, which is essentially an area light. And it gives you these kind of nifty little lines coming off of the area light, so you can kind of tell what direction it's going. But instantly right there, we're actually able to see it render. You notice I didn't even have to change the globals. I didn't do anything. I literally just started the IPR, created a light, and it starts to draw something. Now the IPR window is really my favorite part about this, because it's super handy in many different ways. Obviously, you've got a play and a pause. So when you hit play on this, what it's doing is it's loading your current scene, and it's going to render your active camera. You can tell because it says active camera right underneath there. If at any point, like, I'm changing something and I don't want it to update, I can just hit the pause button, and I can change this all I want, and it's not going to update in the IPR until I uncheck pause. That's handy if you have like a crazy dense scene and maybe you need to tweak something and you just need to pause this because it's taking too many of your CPU cycles. Right next to it, these two things are equally as important as the play, because what this is it's a scale and a zoom. So it's a bit confusing at first, but think of your render output, which I think when you default to, this is in R17, so I think it's like 800 by 600. Yeah. So if I make my scale 100%, it is going to draw 800 by 600. That is my resolution. Okay. So I also have this zoom slider here, and what the zoom slider is doing, it's not changing the render resolution, it's literally just zooming in on that frame. So if I zoom way in, it's going to get pixelated because you're obviously zooming in on a 800 by 600 render. Now the reason why having these two separate is really, really handy is if I were to change this to a high resolution, like let's say 1920 by 1080, okay, lock that down. Number one, if I'm at 100%, I can't even see my entire image. Now I could zoom this down, which is basically making Arnold still have to draw 1920 by 1080's worth of pixels, but you can see that, like, in order for me to actually look at it, I'm zoomed out 70%. So usually what I'll do is I'll leave this at about 100, and I'll do that with scale, because what scale is doing, it's more efficient, it's faster. It's actually only rendering 30% of 1920 by 1080, therefore giving you a faster render speed in your IPR.
Oh, that's cool. It's kind of like After Effects low resolution kind of style.
Yep.
You just get to see it. It'll just render faster in that window, basically, without messing with your like output settings.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, you can leave your output settings at 1920 by 1080 or whatever, and then just work at like a scale of 40% here, and that way you don't have to ever, go back and change it for doing look dev or whatever. It's just a lot easier that way. If we keep kind of going down this line here, we've got all of our channels that you can look at individually. It's pretty self-explanatory. And then you've got this little thing that kind of looks like a weird wireframe globe. And they call this the debugging mode. And it's not going to be super apparent because I just have a gray ball in here right now. But what the debugging mode does, if I enable it, it makes everything like a white plaster material, so that you can really kind of figure out your lighting and whatnot. It's super handy if you're just trying to get your key to fill ratio going with your lighting and you don't want to look at any of your textures. You can turn on this debugging mode and it'll actually just show you like a white clay version of your render. Right next to it is the render region, which is really handy. You can move it around and kind of like place it wherever you want and whatnot. And there's also the short key for that is just holding down Shift and clicking on the viewport anywhere you want. And what that does is it just limits, like you would think, it limits the refresh to just this area right here. The other thing that's kind of cool, I never really used this feature, to be honest, but you can actually send this render region to your actual camera viewport. So if I click this button, it sends you can see it sent the little region over to my my viewport. It's kind of like the interactive, or whatever you call this thing, the interactive render region. I never use it though because it's just weird, and I just like to work in the IPR. It's just easier that way for me. Keep walking down this line. You've got beauty and alpha. So beauty is what we're looking at right now. We could look at the alpha channel. If I had any sort of passes in here, and we'll go over that in a minute, they would all show up in this drop-down list. So I could actually look at them at any time during my little session, my little look dev session. Let's go back out to full screen. Then you have the camera, which you can then just like pick what camera you're rendering. And then a nifty feature that I dig is this little camera icon right here, which is just going to take a snapshot to the PV, to the picture viewer, so that you can, like, oh, I like this, let me send this to the PV, and like then I can A/B it with a different render and see which one I like better, and yada yada yada. Also, at the bottom of the IPR window, it might be hard for you guys to see this, but you have it's actually telling me what my sample rate is, and I'm going to get into that next. It's telling me also how much memory is being used and the resolution that I'm currently rendering my IPR at. And if you want to get really crazy, you can actually change your debug mode to all these different modes. Like the basic debug mode, like I was mentioning, is just kind of this white clay. But if I wanted to be crazy, I could actually change it to wireframe, and I don't know when you'd ever need that, but it's kind of nifty. I'm just going to turn that off and bring it back to basic. So this is basic. Actually, I don't even want basic. I want just diffuse. There we go. Okay. So in a nutshell, that's kind of the IPR window. I like to dock it over here. But for right now, I'll just leave it. I'll just leave it up. Oh, I just accidentally closed it. Okay, so there it is. So yeah, this is, in a nutshell, the IPR. This is where you're going to be spending most of your time. Now, I don't have any render settings yet, meaning if I come up to my render globals right now, it's still telling me that standard is my actual render output because I haven't told it to use Arnold yet. So if I want to tell it to use Arnold to do a final render, I just come down to the Arnold tab right here. And then you can see it deletes everything that it doesn't need, and it's super, super simple. And if I click on the Arnold render tab, we're now met with all of these different sections. We've got a main section, a system section, an AOV section, and a diagnostic section. So first of all, before I move on to any of that, do you guys have any, you guys kind of grasping the workflow with the IPR?
Yeah, IPR, that makes sense to me. I think if you were to set up, because my instinct, right when I open something, is to just see something. I want to see it right away. So instead of I want to get a little bit more into some of these details, but can you just to get that unboxing moment for me, right when I open Arnold, can you set up a little scene and just show really basic, here's a texture, here's a light, here's the backdrop, and so we have something more to kind of see as we tweak more settings?
Yeah. Let me I'm going to invoke my Arnold layout here, which is just going to move it a little bit. Let me just reposition everything back to where it was. Okay, so now this little layout here is what I kind of prefer to work in because it has those controls that I had floating before. It has them docked down here, and it has my IPR kind of docked here. So, all right, let's do that really quickly here. I'm just going to actually kill everything, and I'm going to pull in a simple model so that we can have something to actually look at. I'm just going to grab a Buddha, and we'll frame him up, and we'll grab a Arnold quad light, and we will just kind of make this a bit bigger, and we'll go ahead and turn on the IPR so that it's kind of fun to see that happening while we're drawing. All right, so let's just get a light in here. You can see it's really dim right now. This light, the way that lights work, it's pretty interesting. It's actually, you adjust everything through the light's exposure. So it's done in f-stops. So if I bring this up 3 f-stops and then up 5 f-stops, it's actually doubling it with every stop. And then the other thing to take into account too is because it is a physical based renderer, when your light is really big, I can make this light ridiculously huge. And in real life, if this were a giant big light, it would be throwing out a ton of light, right? So if it's not, if you don't want that effect, you can turn on normalize, which basically says, I don't care what size this light is, I'm putting out the exact same amount of light. But I don't actually like to work that way. I like to work a little bit more physically correct, so I'll turn the normalize off. Now watch, if I make this light really small, it dims that light down. It's much darker on that Buddha. But if I make it really big, of course, the exact opposite happens. So I'm going to make it kind of big, and I'll just bring the exposure of that light down. And let's just go ahead and, whoa, I made that really big. Let's actually pull him off a little bit. And then I'm just going to throw just a simple, 2 lights on this guy, and we'll throw in a psych, and I'm just going to grab the psych from, where do I want to grab that from? I'm going to grab it from our own Like It Pro, Sykes, and I'll just grab this guy, and we'll make him fairly large. And there we go. And let's go ahead and bring these lights up, and we'll move them each of them out off of the cyc wall so that they're not sitting there penetrating our cyc wall. All right, so now here we are. Here we have a scene. We'll make one of these lights a little bit stronger so that it's a little bit easier to see. And we'll bring this one up a bit too. All right, so really simply, I just kind of created 2 area lights and put them on opposite sides of this Buddha. And it'd probably be easier if I just worked in shading mode so you can see what's going on. All right, so let's get in here. Is this what you meant? Like you wanted to kind of see something like this, like that you could actually kind of see what's going on?
Yeah, that's perfect, because I think just that's the first thing I'll be doing when I open this thing.
I think it kind of is like a very common thing. Like you wanna see what the heck's going on. And right off the bat, like it's going to like kind of do an internal like switch. If you like right now, these are just probably, these don't have materials on them. So Arnold's just going to give them a generic kind of white shaded material. If you want to change that, you're going to have to actually create what's called an Arnold material, standard material. And there's a couple different ways that you could do that. Now, right now we're kind of at a fork in the road. I could show you more about like the globals and like what all this stuff means, or I could show you just creating a shader and applying it.
Given that the defaults look pretty good to me right now, I think the next thing I would grab is like the textures, just to see like, I mean, you know me, I'm gonna put some reflections on these things.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so there's a bunch of different ways. I'm gonna show you the most common way to create a shader, and then I'll show you a cooler way to make a shader. The most common way to do it is going to be just to come down to materials and hit create, and go down to Arnold surface and grab a standard, and then just literally like drag that onto one of your objects, or you could do it here as well. The cooler way to do it, if you want to be cool, and I know we like, cool. Yeah, we want to be cool, right? You could actually, in the IPR, just hover over whatever object you want to assign a material to and right-click, and you could say create Arnold material. And what that's going to do is it's going to create an Arnold material for that object, apply it, and open up the material network shader. So it kind of kills a few birds with just one click. So now I'm left with this open blank slate to determine what it is we're going to put on this Buddha right here. So this is, I mentioned IPR is probably where you spend a lot of your time. The other place that you'll spend most of your time will be in here. So this is the Arnold Shader Network, and it looks familiar because it is familiar. It's basically Espresso's UI, but it's tweaked for... oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. It's tweaked for Arnold. And they've kind of used that language because people are used to it, I think. And it's also, it's a good visual node tree as far as what I've seen from other renderers. It's got a quick search here, which you'll spend a lot of time in here clicking and trying to figure out what you need. But for the first thing that we're going to do, since we're just going to create a generic material, I'm just going to type in standard. And it just automatically shows me the standard material. I'm just going to drag that in, okay? And it's automatically it automatically pipes it out to the beauty. So this is a really important concept to learn about Arnold. So anything that's in here, in my little editor here, can be published out. And I like to use the word published out. I don't know if it's technically the right term, but it's a term that makes sense to my brain. So I like to think of it as like, okay, I'm publishing this material out to my beauty, which means that it's going to show up in my render. And if I publish something out to this one, which I'm guessing you probably can't read with the because it's so small, but it says Arnold displacement. So, and then this last one down here says Arnold viewport. So think of these as 3 places that you can publish out a material, a shader, a map, anything you want. So right now I've got this standard material applied to this Buddha on the left, and if I come over to the color and I decide I want to make him red, he's red, and it updates in real time. Which, if you're coming from not having done anything in Octane or Arnold or anything with like an IPR kind of workflow, this is this intuitive kind of like real-time workflow of like doing your shading and lighting is like ridiculously powerful and super addicting. It makes everything go much faster. So let's make this thing Nick friendly. Let's put some specular on it. And you can tell right now, so I threw specular on this Buddha. And let me make this a little bit bigger so it's a little bit easier for people to see. And I'm just going to render.
So this isn't like regular, this isn't cinema specular where it's a fake. This is using the language of specular more true, right? Like this
Correct.
Is the glossy reflection.
Yes. So, and that's a little bit tricky to kind of wrap your head around in Arnold, because it does have this reflection tab down here. And when I first started playing with it, I was like, well, when would I want to use reflection and when would I want to use specular? Because coming from physical, your brain's like, well, specular's fake and I don't want to use that. Well, not in Arnold. In Arnold, specular is actually a reflection, and it is the preferred method of doing reflections because you have control over the roughness. So roughness is kind of interchangeable with other renderers. They use the word glossiness sometimes. So the higher, and what I like about Arnold is it makes a lot of sense. Like right off the bat, it just kind of like makes sense to me. Like if I want something to have more roughness, I'm going to bring the roughness up, and then that specular becomes more rough. Oops, I actually tweaked the anisotropy. So right now, let me just kind of frame up on this Buddha so it's a little bit easier to see. And let's just drag a render region over him. All right, so this Buddha is very, very rough right now, and we could, make him completely rough, and now he's diffusing that reflection by a lot. But and we're actually using a GGX microfacet distribution, which is it has a good, they call it tail, which means that when you have a blurry reflection, that fall off of that blur, they call that a tail, and the GGX model is probably the most realistic. So you definitely want to probably keep it on GGX for most things. All right, so you're wondering like, okay, that's great, but it kind of looks like junk because it doesn't have any Fresnel, so just turn on Fresnel. And there's two ways that you can do Fresnel. You can do it manually here by like increasing the reflectance at the normal. But I don't like to do that because it's not as an effective, physically kind of plausible method. I usually come down to the refraction tab because Arnold is physically based. You can turn on the Fresnel IOR and tell it to use the IOR from the refraction, which is the correct method, and give it like an IOR of a dielectric of like 1.5 or something. And now we're getting that more realistic kind of looking reflection. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So the refraction is tying into that you're saying that's more true to kind of how textures work in real life. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Shaders, like every surface has an index of refraction, even though it might not even be transparent or have any sort of ability to see through it. But that IOR is it's a real number, and that's why I've kind of gotten into the habit of just kind of saying, well, I know that plastics are usually in like the 1.3 to like 1.8 range. I know metals are definitely higher, like in the 5 to even higher than that. I could make this look like chrome if I just brought my diffuse color down to 0, which means that it has no diffuse color contribution, and it's purely reflection. Excuse me.
Wow,
reflection.
that looks beautiful, just like that.
Yeah.
Great.
So like once you understand like how it's working, the knobs are really, really simple, and because it's physically based, you don't have to do as many like hacks to make it look good, if that makes sense. So like right now, you saw I brought this weight down, and was confusing to me when I first opened this program, and I'm just going to turn the spec down so that you can see what's going on. So now we have absolutely no specular contribution in the shader at all, just purely diffuse, and I have my diffuse weight to 0. If I bring this all the way up to 1, he's going to take on the color that I've set here in my color tab. Now, the weight is just simply going to say, how much do you want me to look at this color or map or whatever you have in here? Do you want me to look at it 100%, or do you want me to look at it 0% or maybe 50%? So this kind of comes in handy if you just need to adjust the I guess I wouldn't necessarily call it the luminance, but it's sort of like the luminance, because I could make this, let's say, if we were going to try to make like an aluminum shader, I might make this, let's leave it at white. Okay, so right now he's completely white. I'm going to bring the weight of that white down till he gets to be something like a gray, like this. Then I'm going to slowly just walk up the weight of my specular, okay? So now we're just going to slowly start to make him more metallic. And then I'm just going to slowly bring the roughness up, and we're going to start to get to this almost like a powdered, like a very like sandblasted aluminum kind of look. We could even bring the color weight down a little bit more. So yeah, the IPR in conjunction with these settings, and that's the other thing to remember too, is like this is an Uber shader, which some people coming from other renderers might know this term, but what an Uber shader is it's one shader that can achieve almost any look. So you don't have to create like several different shaders. So with this one shader, it's just the standard shader, I can make things that look like metal. I can make things that look like plastic. I can do subsurface. I can do all of it in one shader, which is really, really nice. So if we wanted to make this guy, for instance, look subsurface, I might bring, and let's just make him red again, because that'll be nice to be able to see that. And we'll bring the specular contribution down to 0. So that you can see it a little bit better. I'm just going to make them a little bit pink. So then we just kind of tab down here, and we see that we have a whole subsurface little section. And a lot of renderers, like, they get really crazy with the subsurface settings, and it's really hard to understand like what it's doing. This program, that's what I love about Arnold. It's so freaking easy. Like, I can literally just drag the weight of the subsurface up, and that guy now is subsurfaced and looking good. And then I can just say, how deep do I want the light to penetrate? 10 centimeters right now. So let's just, I'm just going to grab a cube, move it over, and just say, well, I know this cube is 200 centimeters by 200 centimeters. So maybe I'll have it penetrate 50 centimeters. That would probably go into the Buddha pretty far. And let's just bring these all up to 50, and we'll change the color so we can kind of really see the subsurface working. And let's just make it like yellow. So yeah, I mean, there it is. I mean, and like in the higher,
butter Buddha,
and then just like the higher number you use, right? So like make this higher, because you're like, oh, you want to make it look like the light's penetrating more. It just makes sense to me to say, okay, the radius of that subsurface should be larger. And you start to realize that, like, why can't all subsurface settings be this easy? Because literally I've used a lot of different ones, and they're all confusing. Anyway, so yeah, subsurface all in one shader.
That's amazing.
I'm going to bring this down to 0.
Now, what other? So if I'm coming from physical and all that, what can I use things like gradients and noise and all that stuff that I'm familiar with in cinema? Does that stuff translate here?
Yeah, some of it does. Okay, so they've got their own. The reason that Arnold is fast and the way that they can make it kind of ubiquitous. Is that the word I'm looking for? I guess standardized is a better word. Across all the different platforms that they use, is they have their own ramps, they have their own noises, they have their own set of all of these things. And that's simply because if they wanted to try to support, like, it's the same reason Octane doesn't do it either. It's because if they want to be in all these different applications, they can't literally like figure out the noises in every 3D application, because that would be crazy. But to answer your question, yes, you can use their noise, and I mean, what do you want to see first? We could just throw like a noise on them or something and see what that looks like.
Well, I'm just thinking like things like checkerboards and the variation shader and some of those things. Yeah,
those are all completely there. The workflow is different, but the ability is there to do those things. In fact,
well, maybe we kind of push those to another time or video or something, so we could kind of show more of those differences. I just wanted to make sure, like, I'm not going down a rabbit hole going like, how do I do this?
No. If you anything that you are curious to find, if you start to type it in this little search bar here, like I think they have a checkerboard. Yeah, they do. Okay, so here's their checkerboard, and we can just pipe that into the diffuse color. And he's not mapped correctly right now. So let's give him a cubic map so we can actually see him. So yeah, but dude, I got to show you this. This is dope. You're gonna love this. So this is such a useful thing. Okay, so if you're working on a shading network, like you're making a shader or whatever, and I'm just gonna throw an image texture in here. So, because it's a little bit easier to demo that. So once you throw an image texture in, it automatically will launch a browser for you to like, say, okay, well, what do you want to use for your image texture? So let me just go down to my pictures directory, and hopefully nothing questionable will pop up.
Chad?
Let's, I'll use this picture of me. And okay,
gross,
there we go. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. So now, this is just free floating. It's not connected to anything in my network, right? This is so dope. Like when I learned about this, I was just like, oh man, where was this my whole career? So let's say that I have this shader, or I have this texture, and I wanted to see it applied to my object, so I can make sure it's mapped correctly. I can just take this texture and literally publish it out to the beauty, and it's going to show it to me without any shading. In real time right there.
Just to map it.
Just so I can see the mapping or the color. And I could do that with anything. So like it could be a noise. Like if I just grab a noise and let's just throw the noise in here. And there's a shortcut to publish this out to the beauty, which is going to be Option WV. And now I'm just looking at the noise, so I can be like, oh, I want more octaves in the noise, and I want more scale in the noise, and up too much, maybe not so much, maybe like this. All right, perfect, cool. And now I can go back and look at my beauty. So like that ability to just like, it's kind of like isolating a node in After Effects or something, where you just are able to just concentrate on that one layer in After Effects by soloing it. And really kind of like figure out, oh, that's the right mapping or color. It's like that, but with your shaders, which is like super awesome. And you notice like it doesn't affect anything else in the scene. It's only affecting the shader that I've done that to. So anyway, let's put this texture into the diffuse.
That's cool.
So now it's in the diffuse, and my face is wrapped all over this Buddha. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But that's okay. So yeah, that ability to like publish stuff out to that beauty and check it is really, really amazing. I mean, I could spend a solid 4 hours showing you awesome stuff that you can do in here. But I guess maybe I should probably talk to you about the globals, because I feel like that's something that and before I do that, let's at least make this like somewhat good looking.
Make it pretty.
Yeah, because it's killing me. All right, so let's put like that on there, and let's see, speculator.
Yeah, how did you turn on transparency? Just as a real quick
thing. I
thing.
didn't. Did I? I actually didn't mean to do that, but that's a good point. Since we're here, all I did was turn the refraction weight up. So I just accidentally created glass there, and I didn't even realize that I did it. This will trip you up too. Like if you are doing glass, right, and you're like, okay, well, I'm doing glass, and I'm noticing that like my shadows aren't transparent. Like, what's up with that? So let me just hide these guys so you can see one of these shadows. All right, so I'm just going to zoom in on this shadow. So if you look here at our Buddha, his shadow is not really, it's not really, you're not seeing through it. Like, it's pretty dark. So anything that's glass, you actually have to throw a Arnold tag on. Let me just throw an Arnold mesh or Arnold parameters tag, and turn off opaque. And now that object is no longer casting these unrealistic diffuse shadows. It should be casting like realistic glass shadows.
Will that auto do caustics and all that stuff too?
Yeah, it does a lot of that stuff for free. I mean, you're going to have to increase a lot of the samples to get clean caustics out of it, but I can get into that in a second. But yeah, so if I turn that off now, we're back to this. And sometimes like this doesn't look that bad. I mean, it's sort of believable, but you know, most of the times you don't want that, and you're going to want to put that tag on there. Okay. All right, let me get this back to
Chris. Any shader questions or anything pop up for you? I know you do a lot more texturing and intricate shader networks and stuff like that.
Nope, I'm just absorbing,
soaking it all in,
soaking in the Buddha.
Dude, that's such a cool.
Okay,
it's got a good natural look to it. That's cool.
Yeah, this program has like a pretty awesome like realistic response curve. It looks very filmic without like having to apply any sort of like in Octane. A lot of people are using those response curves and whatnot. This one just kind of has a good natural look on its own. Okay, so let's talk about settings, and to do that, I think I'm going to go ahead and throw these other Buddhas back in, because I think it'll actually help us. Come on, update. All right, there we go. All right, so now let me zoom out a little bit, and let's get a little bit 3/4 on these guys. Okay, so let me bring this render size down. It's a little bit high right now, like 40%. All right, so here we go. So it's going to be difficult for you to see on your side because the grain is going to be pretty much hidden by the compression. But we are getting a pretty significant amount of grain in the shadows right now. And it's okay when you're just doing look dev, but when you're ready to render out for real, you don't want to have that in there. So that's something that we're going to have to clean up. And as far as GI goes, there's really not a lot of bounces, but this is fine. So let's go ahead and look at the globals, because this is the other interesting thing about Arnold, is that, you know, because it's been around for so long, they kind of figured out the best way to do samples without confusing the artist, which is nice, because I've used them all, you know, V-Ray, Octane, Mental Ray. All of them have really weird ways of handling their samples, and I think Arnold is probably the most simple way of handling it. So it really kind of comes down to sampling and ray depth. So they do what they say they do. So ray depth means I'm shooting one diffuse ray per pick, or what, I forget how it goes. It's one diffuse bounce. I've got one glossy bounce and 2 reflection, 2 refraction. These can be brought to 0 because I don't have either one of these on in my scene. Because remember, it's not called reflection; it's called glossy. And specular is glossy. So if I brought this down to 0, it means that I've got one singular bounce of specular on my Buddhas, and it won't bounce that specular again and have it show up on the other Buddha or maybe on the same face of that Buddha. So I usually keep this around 1. If you have a lot of like glass or mirrors or chrome with a lot of reflections bouncing to and fro, you'd probably bring this up to like maybe a 3 or something like that. Diffuse, now this is pretty much your GI. GI is on all the time. There's no tag, there's no setting, it's there. So if I bring this down to 0, this literally has no bounces of light. There's no GI. It's just literally my area lights lighting up my scene. And you can see my shadows just got really, really black. In fact, if I turn off one of these lights, you're going to see how black it gets. So by bringing this number up to 1, it's telling Arnold, okay, it's cool. You can bounce light 1 time. I'm going to let you do that. If you have like a lot of surfaces that like walls in a room, or maybe you need a lot more bounced light, you can bring this number up to like 2 or 3. But you can see like it has diminishing returns on a scene like this because there literally is no other walls or anything for it to bounce light around. So this, and every time you do this is expensive. You know, like you don't bounce light around for free. That's going to cost you in samples. So let's leave this at 1 for our scene. And the ray depth total is basically how many rays are you bouncing around total. Well, if I count these, I really only have 2. So I could actually bring this rate up down to 2 and speed up my render times a little bit that way. Now notice everything that I've done right now has not had any effect on the grain that I've got going in my shadows, because I am just playing with how many times light or glossies are bouncing around. That's all I've done. Okay, so now that I've got what I consider to be a good amount of diffuse light bouncing around and a good amount of glossy rays bouncing around, I'm now going to start to clean it up. So up here in the sampling part, you've got camera AA samples, you've got diffuse, glossy, refraction, SSS, which is subsurface, and then volume. Okay, so this is pretty much where you're going to clean up everything. So now I could, if I wanted to, I could bring down, I could actually bring the subsurface samples down to 0, because I literally don't have any in my scene, nor do I have any refraction in my scene, nor do I have any volume in my scene. But I do have glossy, I do have diffuse, and I definitely have camera. So now these are the 3 parameters in this particular scene that I'm going to need to mess with.
Were those useless parameters actually doing anything there? Like zeroing those out, did they actually increase your render time, or would it be accurately ignoring them already?
Well, that's a good question. I do not know if they are even considered, but just to play it on the safe side, I'll put them to 0, just because I'm like, you know, I don't want them, even if it recognizes that, hey, I know you don't have any subsurface in here, you don't need to turn me down to 0. I don't care. I just turn it down to 0 anyway, because I'm paranoid. So then, like, okay, so now we know that our grain here would be in the diffuse, right? Because this isn't specular grain; it's actually diffuse grain. And there's a method that you can do, and I'll show that to you in a minute once this starts to make more sense. So I could, if I wanted to, just say, well, to hell with everything. I'm just going to increase my camera AA, which essentially, if you look here, the camera AA is at 3, but this little drop down here is actually, this little window right here is really what Arnold is doing. This is what really Arnold's settings is. If I type 3 in here, it's actually the square of 3. It's actually 9. If I have 2 in here, it's actually the square of 2 times the camera samples, because everything is multiplied by the camera samples. So like if I set this to 1 and that to 1, right now you can see that it is a diffuse of 1 is giving me 9 diffuse samples, which is equal to 3 times 3, which is 9. I know this is a lot of weird math, and you don't have to know this stuff. You just have to know where your grain is and how to clean it up. And the easiest way to do that is to kind of identify which one of these areas is the grain existing in. I could crank the AA up, which essentially is going to do it for the entire image. It's basically like saying, all right, I'm going to just throw a ton of samples at the camera and hope that it cleans it up. And I could I could bring this all the way up to 10, and it's going to slowly clean up this frame. And you can see it's finishing up right now, and it's cleaning up all that grain for me. Now, that's not an efficient way to clean up that grain, because what I'm doing is I'm just kind of throwing a blanket of samples over the entire shot and saying, to hell with it, just sample everything. That's not really efficient. You could do it that way, but it's not advisable. So if I brought this back down to where it was 3, I know that, like I said, that grain is in my shadows. Now, there's 2 ways I can clean that up. I could clean that up in the lights themselves, which have samples, and they default at 1, which is generally very low. So without changing any of my sampling here, without touching any of it, I could just come into my light and change this to 3. Okay, so now I'm basically sampling my light 3 times, which is going to give it 9 samples time. I'm not going to get into the math; it's confusing me. So I'm going to let that cook for a second, and while it's cooking, I'm going to go ahead and actually give it a smaller bucket size so that it goes a little bit faster. Okay, so I gave the samples a sample of 3, and I still have a lot of diffuse noise. That's because I've only got 1 diffuse sample right here. If I bring this up to a more manageable number like 2, you're going to see that this grain is going to start to go away. In fact, it's already significantly cleaner. If I bring the sample up to, let's say, 4, that grain will probably be gone completely. And let me just zoom in so we can see it a little bit better.
Would you say it's always better to solve this on the light than in the settings? Is that kind of a good general rule?
Well, I'm going to show you the method that you should do. And once you've done the method a few times, you'll start to get like a sixth sense for like, oh, the samples are grainy in the diffuse. I need more light samples. So the way to do that is to, and I'm going to do it really fast because it'll confuse you if I get too far down this path. I'm basically going to set up AOVs, and AOVs are called, it stands for arbitrary output variable. And these are passes. These are like your reflection, refraction, all that sort of passes. So I'm just going to tell Arnold to actually activate all the standard passes. And the reason that I'm doing that is that I want to be able to come into this little drop down that I mentioned earlier in the IPR and look at where these samples are grainy. So now I can go into my, let's say, direct specular, and this is just, and it's so cool that it's like drawing these passes for you like right there in real time. So this is my specular, and I don't see any grain here, so I know that I can then refer back to my glossies and say, well, I think 2 is good because I don't have any grain here. Let's look at our indirect specular, and that basically indirect specular is the second bounce of specular. And I mean, it's not super grainy. It looks pretty good. Now, if I check my diffuse, so my direct diffuse, you're going to see, okay, that's where the grain is. That's where my noise is that I need to increase. There's 2 places to do that. If the light is really low in samples, in this case it's not, it's got 4, then I would increase the light. Maybe nothing crazy. I never have sampled a light over 6 samples or 7 samples, and a lot of them I'll leave at 1 if they're not like a really key light. So that's good. That's all good there. And so my diffuse is looking pretty good. Let me look at my indirect diffuse. Now this indirect diffuse is basically your GI. So this right now I'm just looking at my my GI. And let's go ahead and look at that. It's pretty darn grainy. So I'm going to have to increase my samples in my diffuse no matter what I do. And that now I could change my light samples all I want. I could bring that back down to 0. It has no effect on the GI because this is not the light is just a light, right? You know, so it's not. It's of course going to throw light to make the GI brighter and darker, but it controlling the samples of this light is only going to help the diffuse. So I'm going to bring that up.
That's only going to be the first pass.
Exactly. So that's like,
and then any bounced light off the wall or anything needs to come from that diffuse.
Yep. So generally,
setting.
yep. So like if I had a scene like this, I'm just going to set it up to be clean, and then I'll tell you how I did it. So I generally would put my camera AA to probably, on this scene, maybe like a 4. And let's go back to looking at our full up beauty so that it's nicer to look at. And then I know that I've got grain in my diffuse, and that's predominantly coming from, and there actually isn't that much grain. It actually looks pretty darn good. The GI actually looks pretty clean to me. So I might leave the diffuse bounces right there, but I do see some grain from that area light still happening. So I'm just going to jump into that light and just add 1 more sample to it and see if it cleans it up. I'm guessing that it will, and then it'll be fine.
And this is like physical, right? Every time you add another number, it's doubling the samples and potentially that part of the render time.
It's not doubling the render time by any stretch. It's just adding. It's basically saying, all right, I'm going to put more samples into this light that you've got going on right now. And
okay.
5 is pretty good for this. I see a little bit of, and I'm just going to isolate this area right here so I can see it better. So I've got a little bit of grain happening here. And I don't think me putting in 2 more samples into this quad light is really going to affect it. I think I need to actually come up in my diffuse. So I'm going to bring my camera AA, leave it at 4. I'm going to set my diffuse to 3, leave my glossy at 2, and that cleaned up the noise for me just fine. And there we have it. Now we have a pretty decent render setting. And like I said, once you kind of get the hang of this, it becomes a lot easier to recognize like where the noise is.
To kind of see it.
And
now is AA is that like anti-aliasing or
yeah,
is
that's
that
exactly what it is. So the camera AA is like this global sampling. It's like basically like throwing the sample blanket over your entire frame, and it's just going to clean everything up. So if you notice here, if you look at the numbers, this is what Arnold is really doing. It's throwing 16 samples at my camera. It's got 144 samples going through my diffuse, 64 samples through my glossy, so a total of 224. So if I wanted to, let's say, maybe we're getting some jaggies on a texture or something, I could bring that camera up to 5, and notice how all the numbers now went up.
Gotcha.
So these are all related to the camera AA. The camera AA is kind of like the master control. So you want to kind of, you obviously don't want to oversample, because then your render times are going to skyrocket. So basically you find what works, and then you're good to go. Like, there's not a whole lot of twiddling of how many irradiance cache in Quasi Monte Carlo, and you know what I mean? Like, it's pretty simplified once you kind of get the hang of it. So the IPR is finishing up here. And the IPR too, like if you want to adjust the IPR the way it's set up and the way that I did earlier, and why we now see these buckets and we didn't see them before, is under the settings, the system tab, I can actually change my bucket size right here, just like you would in physical. I can change the order and all that. When I'm working, when I'm not rendering out for real, I'll work with a small bucket size so that it kind of draws faster. And I turn on my bucket corners just so that I can see where it's drawing. You can turn them off if you want. It's really up to you. You can also tell it only to use a certain amount of threads on your machine. I don't, like maybe you want to save a few threads for doing other work. I don't know, but I usually leave it to auto detect and use all my threads. Anyway, so
now what's up with those texture previews? Is there a way to see those and render those out?
So the way, that's a good question. That was a weird thing for me too when I first started using this program. So when Arnold is working on the IPR, it says, it basically is like, forget you, I've got one pipe I can go down, and you chose for me to go down the IPR pipe, and that's what I'm doing. So if I stop the IPR, it says, okay, you just freed up my pipe to go over here and be able to draw that. Because this actually is Arnold in the little material preview. Like that's
a little IPR.
Yeah, that's like literally a little tiny Arnold in there. And so when you turn him on over here, he goes black. Well, this one, I think because we hadn't, it's just not doing anything now. It's just holding its last state.
But if you change it or something, it might
exactly.
black
If
out.
I changed it, you're not going to see it here. But yeah, generally speaking, when you're using Arnold, like this, the IPR becomes like your palette and your little playground and where you're making stuff happen. And I generally am not even ever looking at my shader balls at all, really.
And that's true with the render. Like if you render this out to the render window, that's kind of the same thing, right? It'll like shut off your IPR.
Yeah, so if I have the IPR going right now, like it's running, and then I decide, well, I want to render this frame out for real, I'm going to change my output size so it's a little bit more manageable in this. So I'm going to go ahead and render this out. I'm going to hit render to picture viewer, and you can see it actually paused and stopped my IPR, and it's actually rendering for real right now. And that's the really nice thing too. Is like what you see in the IPR is what you get here. There's no like difference between these two images in terms of if I let my IPR finish all the way to being done, it would essentially look exactly like this. So,
Gotcha.
So this render, like I said, I think it has 2 diffuse bounces and 2 area lights and some glossy surfaces, and my bucket size are way too small. I wouldn't recommend doing a render with this small of a bucket size. It's not really very efficient from a memory standpoint. I recommend using like and I'm just going to stop it really quickly here. I recommend doing like a 64. A size of 64, and then we'll just go ahead and let that go again, and this will be a little bit more efficient on my cores. But yeah, it's if you know like how to tweak this renderer out, it can be really, really efficient and really, really fast. And of course, it works with team render too. So if I don't have my laptop on right now, but if I had my laptop on and set to team render, I could get more buckets in here. If you have 3 machines or however many, they could all be contributing to this frame. Now they won't be able to contribute to the IPR. That's completely separate and is not like a team render thing, but they can help draw the single frame in the render view or picture viewer.
This looks great, man. This is cool.
Yeah, it's really...
Any other pitfalls like that yellow texture or like applying stuff to models? Like, do all those things work where it looks like the mapping works the same? It looks like as far as like how you distribute textures and all that, that's all still the same as Cinema, right? Like using polygon tags and stuff to restrict textures, and all those things are just kind of handled by Cinema in general. It seems like it's really the textures, lights, and the render settings, like you showed us, is really the huge difference.
Yeah, I'd say you're right. I think the biggest difference there's some similarities in terms of like a quad light is like an area light and it looks the same and it throws the similar kind of light around your scene, and image-based lighting, we can get into that next, is a little bit it's way easier than physical, to be honest. But yeah, you're gonna the steepest learning curve, I think, will probably be in here, making shaders in a node-based environment, as opposed to physical, where you're just kind of like clicking around in different inputs and outputs and things of that nature. But yeah, the tags are all the same. UV mapping is the same. Here's another really rad feature that I wish we could do in physical, which is, let's say that I have this. I'm just going to pipe this node out to. Let's go ahead and start the IPR. And so we can see what we're doing. All right, so I just, I'm looking at just this image of this photograph of myself, and it's on these Buddhas. It's not really none of these are UV'd properly, so I apologize. But anyway, let's say that we liked this, and we're going to throw a color correction node onto it too. So we're going to pipe this into a color correction node, and we're going to desaturate it and make it black and white. And so now we have a very artsy photograph of myself in black and white mapped on these Buddhas. Okay,
this is beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, dude, come on. So let's say that we like this so much that we wanted to use this on a completely different shader. Okay, so I'm just gonna delete these shaders off these guys, and I'm gonna grab. Let's see, we'll just grab another Arnold shader, and we're gonna throw it onto that guy. And we'll just duplicate that shader and throw this one onto this guy and onto this guy. So here we have 2 different shaders on these Buddhas, and we want them all to use this little color correction version of my picture. So this is basically referencing. So if I open up the shader network of this guy and I drag my little color corrected picture of myself up into here, I now have a referenced material. So I can actually use that into the diffuse color here. And now I have a... did I not assign that material to anybody? I thought I did. Maybe I didn't. Oh, there he is. Okay. I guess I did not. Okay, so now check this out. Like, this is pretty amazing. So in physical, you always wish you could instance a map, or so you're not hitting copy paste, and going back in and like changing something, and then you forgot to change it because you had a copy there or whatever. This allows you to create a ridiculously cool material and use it on several different shaders. Like right now, it's being used in the diffuse channel of these 2 guys. If I wanted to maybe use it in a different place on this guy, like I could have it driving, I don't know, the emission of this 3rd one. And this 3rd one, I believe, would be on this guy. And let me make sure that the emission power is up, because it's not. So now, and let's bring the power up to maybe 10. So I'm using the same and this is a really crappy example because my picture's not mapping. It's not mapping correctly, but you see what I'm doing? Like I'm using basically I'm using a referenced little shader tree node that I made in 2 different places on 2 different materials. So it allows you to get really, really creative and not have to redo or copy paste your work over and over and over and over and over again. So I know that's kind of a weird thing to wrap your head around. Does that make sense?
Yeah, in concept theory, like just thinking about espresso and using that and using the same number and piping it in like 4 different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
this is cool.
Yeah, when you start to like wrap your head around that, then it's like, oh man, this is crazy. Like there's a lot of weird, interesting stuff you could do with this thing, and like you can make really complicated stuff, or you can make really simple stuff. It's really kind of up to you. But let's get back to a more simple scene. So again, if I just wanted to, let's say I'm working on the shot, and the way that these guys are shaded, I can't even tell what my lights are doing. This is where that debugging mode comes in handy that we talked about earlier. I can just click on this debugging mode, and you can see it applies like a white kind of plastery kind of material across my scene. So it's just all these little features that these guys have put in over the last, God, I think this renderer has been around since like 2003 or something. I mean, it's insane. I didn't even get to the randomization, the being able to create mats for objects.
Well, let's tease then. Let's tease the next video. I think.
Yeah, I mean we're already in like an hour into this thing, and I feel like
I think as far as like a quick start or just for me to like have enough to jump in to Arnold and start like playing and breaking stuff. I think it's good. I'll probably have some questions after we play, and maybe Chris too, if you want to play around, and maybe we, kind of do another one of these after we have a little bit of time and say, hey, I'm missing this part, or I wish I could find this, and you could kind of walk us through those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Did you guys want? I guess the only thing we didn't show that I wanted to show was image-based lighting, but if you want, we can tease that.
Well, yeah, let's wait on that too, because we might have some stuff to show with that soon.
Oh, right, yeah.
So that might be good. The thing that I think maybe will help other people that are opening this for the first time is maybe having a file like this. Is there? I don't think we could share this because of the Buddha model, but is there maybe if you just swap those Buddhas out with some spheres or like something basic in Cinema, that we can maybe share this scene file with everybody?
Yeah, I'll just build. I'll leave the psych in there, I guess, and just stamp it down, and then throw a bunch of primitives in there just so that you have something to look at.
I think that'd be helpful if people for the first time, whether they bought it or they have like the demo or something, have a scene like this to kind of fly around in and instantly see that window moving around. I think it'd be kind of cool. So
yeah,
I only want that file if the photo of Chad is in there.
Never. I feel like I need to change this this map type right here. How do I do that? I think I can do it up here. I need to like at least make this thing a cube.
Is that one of your YouTube photos? Are you pointing at the camera?
I have like my Macbeth chart.
Is your color card?
Yeah. Here, you know what? This is better. So at least it's a cube, and my face isn't all distorted and weird looking. That's kind of a cool thing too. You can actually come in here and use like an Arnold shader ball, and then you can open up this window. Like if you wanted to actually, so you can see the IPR is actually, like I said, it's doing its thing on the reels. If you wanted to like kind of like work this way to build a shader, you totally could. But yeah, you can see it's the A. Thank God the logo is covering up my face. So that's
perfect.
It's perfect for me. I love it. In fact, I'll just.
Well, why don't we do that next one? Because if I think getting on an hour on this one is pretty good for a start, and then we'll kind of try to do this again, because I already have like camera questions and stuff, but I think we should hold it off for now, and maybe also see what other people have. So if we could put this out, and if you guys out there watching this thing have any questions too, maybe we could kind of wrap back around in a couple weeks or a month and do another one.
Cool. All right.
Sweet. Anything else from anyone before we wrap this one up?
No, all good for me. Thanks, Chad.
Yeah, no problem, guys.
Thanks, Chad. This looks great.
All righty.
Thanks again for watching, everybody. Quick question of the day for you before we go. What renderer are you most excited about learning? Put it in the comments down below. We'd love to hear from you guys. Now also, be sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, and if you want that scene file, be sure to check the description down below, and also check up right here. We're gonna link it up in the YouTube style. All right, we got a ton more videos coming soon. Stay tuned. We'll see you in another one. Bye-bye, everybody. It's too long. You're talking too much. Hey, Nick, you're talking too much. You're talking too much. That was it. Boom, mother.